Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Blue Ox braking system on a 2018 Jeep Wrangler JK. Now when it comes to flat towing any vehicle, there's going to be 5 main components that are going to be required. And these are just the basics that you'll have to have. There's going to be a few other things that you may need to add in dependent on your vehicle. And some of those auxiliary things would be a stoplight switch, a charge line, a high-low adapter, on our case, a 12-volt outlet kit for the portable braking system. But the main basics that you're going to want to focus on first are going to be the base plate, which is going to attach to the frame of the vehicle and create the structural mounting point for all of your components to go on and safely tow the vehicle down the road. The connection point between your base plate and the hitch on the RV is your tow bar, and the tow bar again is just that connection point. But we also have safety cables, which are just like towing a trailer. You would have your safety chains. These are there just in case of a disconnect. If you forget to hook any of this up, it's still going to keep the vehicle attached. You also have diode wiring, which will transmit the light signals from the RV to the towed vehicle. So that's going to be your running lights, your brake lights, as well as your turn signals. And in some cases, some of your braking systems, like the Stay and Play Duo, require the diode wiring to be tapped into to get the signal to start braking. We also have our braking system, which today we have a Blue Ox Patriot portable system, but all of them are going to have a breakaway switch. And that's in case of everything failing. This will pull and put the brakes on the vehicle. That way it's not rolling down the highway. Now, a braking system is going to be a required component of flat towing a vehicle, and there's a lot of different options out there. It really breaks down into 2 different buckets, and one of them is going to be a fixed system, which attaches to the vehicle, ties into a lot of times your air lines, and then has a physical mount on the firewall to apply the pressure on the brake pedal. Your other alternative is going to be a portable system, and this is one of my favorites. This is the Blue Ox Patriot. It's a really great option, and it really comes down to this is super easy to get installed. So if you're worried about installing a fixed system, I get it. It seems a little bit, there's a lot to it. And you maybe not want to have to pay someone labor-wise to do that. This is something you can do yourself. It is pretty easy to do. And what it comes down to is it's super easy setup. I also like the digital display that you're going to be using for manual braking, any adjustments. That goes in the RV, so you can adjust that on the fly from the dash of your vehicle, which I think is really cool. Now, that's not to say that portable systems don't have drawbacks. And the drawbacks really just come down to when you're not flat towing your vehicle, where do you store this? But that's kind of a minor thing. And so if you're just kind of a casual flat tower, awesome option. And also if you plan on changing your towed vehicle later down, you can take this from one vehicle to the other, whereas a fixed system, you can. It's just a little bit more uninstalling that you'll have to do. So this definitely becomes a great option for a lot of you out there that just want that braking system to be safe and legal, but also nice and easy to use. The basic concept of setting this up really comes down to once you get it dialed in and it's working, you should be able to keep the feet kind of in the same position, so it'll make it a little bit easier. But this will clamp around the brake pedal, and it's going to actuate whether you are manually depressing the button. It's very much like a brake controller, so you can have that manual override, or it's going to use an inertia sensor to when this is kind of feeling that stopping happening with the RV, it's going to apply it. It is a little bit delayed, and that's not a problem because just like a brake controller, you don't always want that coming on very hard. Sometimes as you're starting to really slow into it, that's when you want it to gradually go on. And a hard panic stop as well, it's going to come on just as hard as you brake. It's just slightly delayed, which does save it from constantly actuating when it really doesn't need to. So the way this works, this is going to sit on our floorboard. If you have floor mats, I would recommend taking those out so there's a nice solid spot for it to rest and not slide around. You don't want this becoming the spot that, you know, gives it that variable to basically move around. So this set up to the floorboard, this will be adjusted to rest against the back of, or the front of the seat here, which we will be adjusting the seat. This will clamp down, and pretty much that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll get this clamped on. Slide that over, push the tab, and that clamps around. And then from here, that cable that I ran in looks like this, and that'll go to the breakaway. Our 12-volt outlet I mounted here, so we just plug this in. We'll hit our power, And you're gonna see it's gonna flash, so all we need to do is I'm gonna bump this up to where it's not necessarily resting against it, but pretty close. We'll then push the setup button. That's gonna apply the brakes, and that's how it's gonna apply it when you drive. And then once we do that setup, it is now at a portion of where we're good to go. Now I'll show you the controller that goes in the RV and how it works. Now I have this plugged in on our RV, and you have enough cable to really run this clean. You also have this rubber mat that can sit on your dash and not slide around. You can get this mounted up. There's also hook and loop available to, you could mount it up nice and clean here to where you can see it. But the great part with this, right where I have it, I can look immediately and know the brakes are being applied. You can also, again, use that manual override or that brake button. So as I press this, I know for a fact that the brakes are being applied on my towed vehicle by just simply looking at this. The installation is super easy to accomplish. You can definitely do this. You're not going to really need any specialty tools to do it. And if you're doing the rest of your components, it's not a bad time to do it at the same time. That way we can get everything routed nice and clean. I'm going to walk you through all those steps to make sure you get yours hooked up. So let's take a look at it. Now, one of the pros of a portable braking system is, as far as installation goes, it's pretty easy. There's still a few components that you're going to have to get in place, but compared to a fixed system, it's very simple. So the basics of it are going to be, you have a breakaway switch on the front of your vehicle. That's going to be standard for any braking system, and you're going to want to get this mounted up on the front where it's easily able to be attached to the hitch on the RV. So in our case, I ended up using a 6-pole bracket that goes on to our Blue Ox base plate here, and then I just kind of fabricated a little piece of metal to get this attached. It's also, you know, if you need to store this outside on the other side when you're not using it, great. So while we're looking at the breakaway switch, we have this connection. And this is going to be where we have this cable that's included in our kit, and this is just going to plug in together. A lot of times once this is plugged in, I'll wrap some electrical tape around it, just kind of keep this nice and protected. And then from there, we're going to have this cable running through a grommet on our firewall, which on the Jeeps is very easy, and this will plug in directly to our breakaway port, making it one of our connections down. Now, the only other connection that needs to be made is going to be a power source. And on this, it uses a cigarette style outlet. Now, on newer vehicles, we're slowly seeing that you don't find these. A lot of times they've gone to a USB. But something that I'll recommend pretty much for any portable braking system is picking up a 12-volt outlet kit. The 12-volt outlet kit just goes directly to the battery and gives you this port to be able to plug this in. You can mount this underneath in the footwell, where generally this is going to sit anyway, so it's really nice to have this in place, specifically set up for your braking system. Something else that's really nice is it goes directly to the battery, so it always has that 12-volt power. Some vehicles, to put them in tow mode, you need to disconnect the battery. This is a great way to make sure that it always has that 12-volt power. So we're going to be running this in conjunction. This is the Roadmaster one. It's super easy install. And then once that's in place, we're going to be doing some adjusting to get this all set up in the footwell so it properly actuates. And the way that we're going to be testing it and making sure that it works is going to be the monitor here. This goes in the driver's seat of the RV, or at least up on your dash. It's got this little rubber mat here that you can set this, and it kind of acts like a brake controller. You can adjust all of that here, and this is just going to plug into 12-volt power and wirelessly connect to this, making it this super easy. So really all it comes down to is getting our wire ran into the inside of the vehicle through that grommet. So I'll get that set up and then I'll show you how I did it. So I've gone ahead, I got everything routed, and I'll show you the path that I took. So I simply just kind of followed the diode wiring that I already had and zip tied it up to some of the wire loom. You can use this bottom portion here to kind of get that up. Now, you're going to want to avoid the sway bar, so I just went up where this wire loom is, and there's a pretty clean path straight up towards the side of the radiator, and that's where I pull up our wire, and I'll show you exactly where it goes. Now that wire kind of came through in the front here of the washer fluid bottle, and I just routed it behind the plastic here. If you need a little bit of extra space, you can take these, the 10 millimeter out. I continued the wire through on this plastic as well, where I did take the 10 millimeter out, kind of slid that to the side to pass this through, And our grommet is going to be located to the right of the brake booster. And it's kind of almost like a sticker, it feels like. So if you have a screwdriver, you can go on the inside and see it pretty easily. Just poke that through, and that's going to give you that access to run that plug in. Now, while we're here, I'll also kind of show you, I did that 12-volt outlet, and that's very simple. I did have to extend some wires to make it work, just because the battery's on the other side. But there's just 2 wires off of that, so if you're going to be doing that 12-volt outlet kit, I suggest routing it at the same time through that firewall. So I just took the plug in and then fed that through. One of the wires is going to go to a factory ground. I ended up cutting off the small ring terminal they had and got a larger gauge one and put it here. Our power that runs from the 12-volt on the battery, I just followed the wire loom across this threshold and then attached it to the battery post to get that 12-volt power. So that's pretty easy. So at this point, really, we're just going to head inside, and I'll show you where everything passes through and how to get everything set up. So you can see here under the footwell where that grommet is that I passed it through, as well as our 12-volt outlet. And we have quite a bit of extra length of wire, which is totally fine. That's going to make it nice and easy to be able to hook it up to our braking system. If you want to, you can always coil it up and put a twist tie or something along those lines to clean it up as necessary. But a lot of times you can kind of just tuck that into the footwell somewhere and it'll be out of the way. Our 12-volt outlet, I just kind of mounted up on the side. It's next to the OBD2 port, and I just used some self-tapping screws to get that mounted up. And as I mentioned before, that just passes through the firewall and makes those connections to the ground and 12-volt. Now we'll get our brake system in place, and this clamp will just go around the pedal, and then once you have it in place, it should be a tight fit. I didn't have to change any of these grips that they have. They have ones that for different size pedals, but once you have it in place, you'll just push this button. It's going to clamp down. Should be a nice bite onto there, and that's normally what I do first step. Get it attached to the brake pedal. Probably want to move your seat back just to make sure you have room to work. And then from there, that's when I adjust the feet as well as this seat backing plate. So I'll get this clamped on real quick. And with that clamped down, I'll just push our button. That's going to kind of lock that in place. And I've played around with the feet here. You're try to get it as level as possible. You're going to want to make sure it's not putting pressure on the pedal. So as this rests, you can see it's kind of pushing it. That's not what you want. You want it to be at a state where it's not going to be pushing that. And from here, we'll just take our plug that we fed through here, put that in our breakaway. We'll then take our power source and put that into our new outlet. And we get our power button on. So from here, you may or may not need to do a sync onto your controller. If that's the case, you can refer to your instruction manual and it's going to be really good. But as it's blinking back and forth, it's waiting to see where it needs to be as far as it's going to actuate it. So what I'll do is I'm going to bump my seat forward to where it's not necessarily putting pressure. If you put pressure on it, it's going to give you 2 lights. But as I kind of move this back to where it's free floating, you'll get those lights blinking back and forth is what you want. So at this point, I'm going to push the setup button. And that should actuate the pedal. And you can see where it kind of rests back down. That is fairly normal. You can kind of bump the seat forward. I would actuate it a few times if you need to by just cycling the power and then that setup button. And what you're looking for is that it's pressing against the seat to get that pedal moving. It is pretty, nature of these portable systems, they do kind of move around a little bit, so don't be surprised there. It doesn't have to be a super firm fit. The main thing is when this actuates, it's able to push that pedal. So really what you're going to look for is that pedal pushing in, and that should be good. Now once we have that solid green light, what we're going to want to do is plug in our manual controller that we have either into your RV or another 12-volt source. Preferably not the car. A lot of times you'll have to have the car on for those to kick on. So I'm going to use my test box to get that plugged in. And it's pretty straightforward. Basically, it's kind of like a brake controller where you have a manual override or a manual brake button. So test to make sure that it's working. You can just push that We can see that it is actuating. You can adjust the force. I'd probably drive around with the vehicle and see if it needs a little bit more force. You can also have some backlight features that you can make bright or not. The menu also allows for sensitivity. You can pair the remote if you do need to. That's where you're going to find it. So there's a bunch of different settings that you can play with, but the main thing is it is working when you press that brake button. Now, the other thing that you're going to want to check is that your breakaway switch is working. So I'll go ahead and pull that and make sure that it's going to apply the brakes if that was to ever be pulled. And as I pull this, I can hear that our alarm on the monitor is going off. I could also hear that the brake pedal actuated, but let's take a look at it closer. If you want to mount this up on the dash of your RV, I would maybe suggest finding a nice spot that you're happy with, that you can run your cable nice and clean. And it comes with included hook and loop that you can stick this on, and it's going to be a nice permanent mount. If not, this rubber cup here allows to sit on the dash where it shouldn't slide around, and then you can place your monitor in here, and that's going to kind of give you that heads-up display. So put it in a spot where it's easily accessible if you need to manually press that brake pedal, but also just to keep an eye on your braking as you're applying it. And that was a look at installation of the Blue Ox braking system on a 2018 Jeep Wrangler JK.